Welcome to the Bookies Plus weekly betting show where you'll get free NFL picks for week 16 from 4 of our gambling experts. You also can get all of these picks and picks for every other sport by going to the site bookies.com/picks. Again, bookies.com/picks. That better be in your bookmarks. Anyway, we got you covered on every sport. Next week's a holiday, so we're not going to have a show for week 17, but we'll be back roaring on January 2nd with week 18. And from that point, we're going to go forward. We got Santa Claus in the house, Bill Speros. He's our senior betting analyst for bookies.com. We got Adam, the ATM Thompson, over 60% NFL last 3 years, one of the nation's premier handicappers. You got Nick the Whalen in the industry for over a decade. You know him from RotoWire. You know him from VSiN, DraftKings. And I'm Jim Coventry. It's going to be a great week. Let's get right to it. Bill Speros, ho, ho, ho. We're going to start with you with the Eagles, and then Nick and myself are going to pile on that one.
The Eagles, what's not to like about them? They really impressed me against Pittsburgh. I bid on the Steelers in that one. It's a lot of love these days between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Not much concern there. You know, the Eagles have really impressed this year, winning 10 straight, covered in 5 straight. They wrap up the division with a win in this game. Thankfully, Saquon Barkley's injury isn't serious. This team's got it going on. And unlike the Lions, who are starting to fray with serious injuries, the Eagles are healthy. They're getting healthier. And they are the team to watch as the playoffs approach. This should be an easy cover and win for them, weather notwithstanding.
Nick, go ahead, pile on here.
Yeah, our pal Santa Claus, I think, laid it out pretty well here. But I don't think the market has adjusted quite enough on this game. Maybe there are some, lingering injury concerns on the Philly side of things. Obviously, Saquon Barkley was in and out in the second half. Seems like he's going to be fine. Hurts is dealing with the injury. Certainly looked fine to me this past week, although he did lose a fumble early in that game against Pittsburgh. And then, A.J. Brown looks like he survived his injury scare as well. That looked like a bad one on a hip drop tackle. But I expect all three of those guys to be out there. And, to me, it felt like the Eagles came out and tried to prove a point last week against Pittsburgh that, yes, we can throw the ball if we need to. They threw it 32 times. That's not who the Eagles have been for most of the season, especially not these last couple of months. But I think we get back to Eagles smash mouth football here. I think that's the way that they win this game against Washington. Keep in mind, Philly won the first matchup. They were at home 26-18, but they outgained Washington 434 to 264 in that game. 2 more yards per play on the afternoon for the Eagles, and they missed 2 field goals, and they went 1 of 3 in the red zone. So I think we see a better overall performance for the Eagles. They didn't even play well in that first matchup. They still won comfortably. I think that defense is going to be ready for a Washington team that I was surprised the degree to which they struggled, especially in the second half against the Saints. I mean, Jaden Daniels took 8 sacks last week. 8 sacks. He's a tough quarterback to bring down. If that's happening against the Saints, it makes you wonder what it's going to look like against Philly. And the last thing I'll say, guys, Philly 7-1 against the number on the road or at a neutral site this season.
So what I'll add to this one is the last time they played, basically all of the yardage, not all, but like a heavy percentage, was screen pass to Austin Eckler and dump offs to Zach Ertz. Basically, they could get nothing else. There was nowhere to breathe downfield. The running game had no room to operate. Austin Eckler is long gone on injured reserve. Zach Ertz had a concussion last week. Those are the only 2 guys that did something against them. And even that in this game could get taken away, although the Eagles are happy to give them that. You could have those screen passes, those dump offs. So that's fine. And we know Washington, Cliff Kingsbury's not making any adjustments. It's not in his DNA to do that. So he's kind of in a whole lot of trouble here. So yeah, just pretty easy on this one. The Eagles, they get the boost on the road with the low, with the -3, because they're probably 10 points better than this team. But being on the road, it gives that kind of veil. And this should be an easy one for the Eagles. Adam Thompson, you're up with the Packers. If you want anything to this game we just talked about, feel free.
Well, you convinced me. There's one pick I wasn't sure what I was going to look for at Bookies Plus. Eagles sound pretty good right about now, so I like where you're all going with that. But yeah, Packers. Speaking of playoff contenders who are playing very well right now and who actually aren't banged up, other than Jair Alexander. It's early in the week, but the way the Saints are looking right now, they're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but they go in all 3 of their games, and chances are they're not going And I think you have to take that consideration with Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. All might not play in this game. I'm kind of hoping so at this point. Packers, they've won 3 out of 4. 3 of those, all 3 of the wins I think have been by. They've won 3 of 4, right? That's right. They've all been by 13 or more. I think this offense has scored 30 or more in 4 straight weeks. I think it's hard to imagine a decimated Saints offense just keeping up, especially on the road at night. Temps in the teens expected for this game. When it's cold and miserable and you get down, it gets colder and more miserable and you get down by more. So I think Jacobs can lean on these guys in the second half, and this is a 3-touchdown victory for Green Bay.
We're going to head to round 2 unless anybody has a word on the Packers. All right, round 2, we'll have Bill and then Adam talking some Buccaneers, and then we'll come in with Nick and myself after that with different games.
Oh, you say Buccaneers? Well, excuse me.
We're ready. Costume change.
And I want you to know I have Bucko Bruce right here.
Look at that. Got the creamsicle color hat.
Ready to show some respect to the soon-to-be 4-time NFC South and 5 straight years in the playoffs champion, Tampa Bay Bucks. Once again, they come out of nowhere late in the season. They did this when they had Brady the year they went to the Super Bowl. They won their last 4 straight regular season games to get to the playoffs. They went on the road as a wild card. This year they're going to be division champion again. The Falcons are taking another dive, even though they barely won last night. I don't even think that one should count. The Bucks destroyed the vaunted Chargers defense, thanks to Mike Evans stretching them and Kate Otten in the running game smashing them up close. The Bucks are just really, really clicking right now. They're going into Dallas. I mean, come on, they beat the Panthers. That might have been their Super Bowl. Unbelievably, Mike McCarthy's going to be back next year.
Oh my!
So the Cowboys really have nothing to play for. I mean, this is a night game. It's a Sunday night game. They're not. The Cowboys haven't played well at home this year. The Bucks really need this game. They're going to have that fast track. They're going to light it up here, big time at Jerry World.
Adam, go ahead and pile on.
Yeah, Tampa's key, lately has been their ground game has been overwhelming. And that's opened up lanes for Baker Mayfield in the passing hack. These last 4 games, they're averaging 456 yards of offense. They're averaging 31 points per game during this 4-game stretch. And Dallas, they allow 33 points a game at home on the season. That is the most in the NFL. And defensively, for them, if you look at their overall season stats, they're not spectacular against the pass. But 3 of the last 4 weeks, they've held their opposing QBs to under 200 yards in passing. So that has improved drastically as well. And Cooper Rush, he's not a guy still you can rely on. He's had, 2 okay games and 2 not very good games. And I think Tampa Bay is just surging in every way. And -4 on the road. I mean, Dallas does still have something to play for, but just Jimmy's and Joe's, I just don't think they have it right here. So, and trajectory wise, Tampa is just on a higher trajectory right now. So I like the Bucks too.
Nick Whalen, you're going to talk some 49ers. You're going to go against Tua and that pop gun of an arm he has.
Yeah, first of all, I will say I like Tampa as well. For the sake of differentiation, I wanted to talk about a different game, but I think everything that Bill and Adam said is spot on. And it's also worth noting that Dallas is dealing with some injuries in the secondary. Trayvon Diggs is out. Jordan Lewis got banged up last week. This is a totally different defense when they're missing any of those guys, let alone potentially 2 of their top 3 defensive backs. So that's something to monitor on the Dallas side. But I'm taking the points here with San Francisco. I know they're on the road. I know they're going down to Miami. I know it feels like their season is over. I'm not as down on the Niners after this past week as maybe I should be. Maybe not as much as the market is, but worst case weather game. You're playing on a short week. I thought the defense actually played about as well as it could last week against the Rams. They'll be in a much better spot in terms of the conditions this week. I don't know how you trust the Dolphins, guys. That they had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to go and win that game last week against Houston, held the Texans under 200 yards and came up with 12 points in an absolute must-win scenario. So it's more of a fade of the Dolphins than anything else. Miami cannot run the ball whatsoever. This has been a systemic season-long issue for the Dolphins that's only gotten worse as the year has gone along. I think with the bodies back on that San Francisco defense, certainly don't think that changes this week. Jalen Waddle is banged up. We have no idea if he's going to be out there. He left in the second quarter this past week. Miami, for the most part, has struggled at home this season. They're just 2-5 against the spread at home. And who are their wins, guys? Who have the Dolphins beat this year? They beat Jacksonville. They beat New England. They beat New England again. They beat Vegas. And they beat the New York Jets in overtime, a game that they probably should have lost. Their only good win to me was that Rams game in week 10. So this team does not have a history necessarily of stepping up in these spots. Give me the points with San Francisco. I know it's not many points, but I will take the Niners here, and I would lean under on that 46 total as well.
Yeah, I had that pick, Nick, in my initial set of 3, and then I kind of like the Cardinals a little bit more, but 49ers, that was right there as well. Anybody else have a comment on Miami or the 49ers? All right, yeah, I'm going to talk.
Since their defensive backfield got healthy, and Bosa, Bosa is back, just a huge difference. That Rams team was scoring a lot of people, and obviously the weather may have been a factor there, but I think those guys were even more of a factor.
Yeah,
no doubt. I'm going to talk about the Cardinals -4. I went with the Cardinals last week. Certainly didn't regret it. Here's the deal with the Cardinals: if the Cardinals play like an elite type team, yeah, they're not that in that level, and so they'll get beaten by the better team. Seattle was running hot, and they lost 2 to them. They lost to Minnesota. It's not who the Cardinals are. But we saw last week when they played the Patriots, they beat up on teams that they're way better than. And the Panthers, it's the same deal here. The Panthers had a nice little stretch. But defensively, the Cardinals are very well schemed. They definitely bring full aggression as often as possible. Like, they don't slow down at all. And I think that's going to be a problem for the Panthers. Xavier Legette not expected to play. Not that he's a big difference maker, but he's the one person you got to kind of account for when you're setting up your defense in case he could get downfield on the perimeter. He's not there. It's a bunch of underneath guys. And this is perfectly set up for the Cardinals, who are good against the run. And then offensively, this is another James Conner game. Like we said last week, same deal here. Carolina is going to try to load the box up a little bit, but they'll put 2 tight ends on the field, the Cardinals will, and Connor's a battering ram, and Connor will bounce to the outside if he has to. Connor's a superstar, and one of the more underrated superstars in the game, and he will carry them here. And then if the Panthers get a little bit too happy creeping down, Kyler Murray has the ability to make a couple throws against a secondary when they're not facing J.C. Horn. So I have no qualms here going back to the Cardinals on the road to cover a 4-point line. Anybody have a comment on that game? Round 3, here we go. Bill Speros, get us off started with the Rams, -3.
Well, look, Mac Jones let me down last week against the Jets. They tried. Jets tried, but Mac was in a giving mood. This week, the Rams are headed to MetLife. It's going to be cold. Temps in the 20s, winds in the 10s. You're going to see swaths of empty seats. That wind's going to be swirling. The bags are going to be blowing off the faces of the Jets fans. I mean, Jets fans will go to this game just to be miserable together and to just voice their angst and frustration in not winning the Super Bowl for the 56th consecutive season. They're also 0-7 against the NFC on the line. The Rams need to win this game to stay in first place. And Matthew Stafford, he played for the Lions. He had plenty of these games in Green Bay and elsewhere in Chicago. He's not going to be spooked by this weather. They're just going to give the ball to Kyron Williams, and we'll watch Aaron Rodgers melt down again since Devontae Adams got his special catch last week. Rams -3.
Love it. Ed, anybody else on that game?
Stafford is statistically one of the best cold weather quarterbacks ever. He played in Detroit indoors, but whenever he had to go to Chicago or Green Bay, he performed.
Love that. And while you're at it, Adam, why don't you tell us about the Falcons game? You're actually going to go to the Falcons. Well, I can't wait to hear this one.
Yeah, we're not. This is not a ringing endorsement for Atlanta. It's more of a ringing all in against whoever the Giants are playing lately. I mean, Atlanta, they looked not good. I mean, they dominated every facet really last week or last night, and found a way to barely hold on against the Raiders, and that snapped a 4-game losing streak. That was their first win in 5 weeks. It was not impressive, but this game is hugely important. It made this game hugely important. Now they're back home. They're taking on a Giants team that obviously is completely bottomed out. Since Daniel Jones got sent to the curb, nothing has improved. In fact, they've lost the 4 that he hasn't played, 3 of them by at least a touchdown, 2 of them by at least 3 touchdowns. And at some point, Atlanta just has to match its potential. I mean, you look at this team, especially offensively, this team should be scoring 30 points. The fact that it isn't, something is wrong, but I think Bijan Robinson can really get things going. That can open up the play action for Kirk Cousins, which he's a master at. And if the Giants can't get to Cousins, and I don't think they can, it should make for a big game for this offense. So if they can't score 30 plus here at home in the Dome against the Giants team that has given up and doesn't have any of its best players other than Malik Neighbors, then changes need to be made. But -8.5, the Giants 31st against the run. I think Bijan has a huge game and sparks a big win for Atlanta.
Well, with all the excitement of talking about the Falcons, Nick's going to stay there and talk about the under element of this game.
Yeah, certainly for my sake here, I hope it's not a 30-plus point afternoon for the Atlanta Falcons. And I will say, Adam, you're getting a good number. Smart by you to lock in the 8.5, because I'm seeing 9.5 at some shops, I'm seeing a 10.5 even at FanDuel right now as I look at the live odds. So already seeing some movement in favor of the Falcons. But ultimately here, I think we have 2 pretty bad offenses. We have no idea who's going to be playing quarterback for the New York Giants. Could be Drew Lock. Could be Tommy DeVito. Could be Tim Boyle. We have no idea. We probably won't know until later in the week. Meanwhile, the Falcons scored 1 touchdown last night against the Las Vegas Raiders. That came on a broken coverage, like a play that was so slow developing that I honestly thought it was whistled dead. Like nobody seemed to have any idea what was going on. Other than that, they tack on 2 field goals and a safety. They don't trust their kicker whatsoever. Koo missed a field goal.
Oh my gosh!
Late in the game, they had multiple opportunities to kick from around 50 yards and ended up punting. So it's a team that's ultimately, I think, playing kind of scared. Like the Falcons are basically playing not to lose. That's how I saw last night's game. That's how I see this week's game going as well. They scored just 15 points against Vegas. They've scored 15, 21, 13, 6, and 17 over their last 5 games. The passing game is a complete mess. I saw a great stat this morning on last night's game, guys. The Falcons faced 24 first and 10s last night and ran the ball on 23 of those plays. This is just not an aggressive offense right now. But if you look at the Falcons defense, pass rush has been better over the last few weeks. They got after Sam Darnold a couple weeks ago. They got after Desmond Ridder last night. Secondary remains a liability, but I'm not really sure that matters against the New York Giants and who they're rolling out at quarterback. Giants do a decent job against the run if you're looking for positives with this team, especially when they're not facing a mobile quarterback. And obviously Kirk Cousins is not that. And then, of course, the New York Giants are averaging 13.2 points per game over their last 9. This is not some recent trend for the New York Giants. So again, guys, I think Atlanta, to me, they're in survival mode. They're just trying to hang around for the NFC South. They're not hunting big plays. They're trying to avoid disaster. I think they win this game. I don't think it's an explosive offensive performance for either side.
And the beauty of modern sports is that you could place a bet on both the Falcons and the under, and you don't have to watch the game. You can just wait till it's over, check the final score, collect your winnings, and enjoy something else.
Hey, 23-6. Let's make everybody happy. 23-6.
And that sounds reasonable. But again, don't watch the game. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I think if you're watching that game, you got some issues that we can't fix. And you probably need spiritual and/or emotional guidance with a licensed therapist and/or clergyman.
Exactly. We'll give you a pass if it's a primetime game. It's the only game on. You got to watch football. We get it. But yeah, like Bill said, you need help if you're going to watch this game. I got one more left for you. The Lions -6.5 at the Bears. I think this line is pricing in some NFL playoffs panic for the Lions because of all the injuries they've had. And it has been a litany. Their entire linebacking crew was wiped out. Now most of their defensive line has been wiped out. They lost their best outside corner for 6 weeks with a broken jaw. Yeah, it's a problem. But here's the deal. The Bears are hosting this game. And we know that Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, will blitz. Whoever he has out there, he is going to blitz. And since Thomas Moore took the Bears offense over, the first 2 weeks when he was a coordinator, did nice things. Then they fired Eberflus and they made Thomas More the head coach. Too much on his plate right now. He's no longer been able to move the different levers and improve the offense. It's already going downhill from where it was at after those first 2 good weeks. Detroit's going to capitalize with aggression. But here's the better deal. On the other side of the ball, remember that Thanksgiving game that Detroit almost coughed up? They obliterated the Bears. They ran the ball. They controlled the clock, kept the defense off the field. They piled a big lead up. In this game, they're realizing now they've got to cover for their defense. They can't take their foot off the gas offensively anymore from now till however long they play in January. So this offense, even without David Montgomery, fine, Gibbs plays more. Gibbs will annihilate the Bears defense. I just think Detroit's going to put 31 points up. There's no way the Bears are scoring 24, especially after having surprised them on Thanksgiving. So to me, it's a fairly easy Lions win. Anybody else on that game? Let's get some closing thoughts. Bill Speros is getting ready to head out.
I'm going to put Santa back on since it's a giving season. Hopefully, we've helped y'all with your betting this year. We're taping this on Tuesday. As we tape, there is a Senate subcommittee hearing on gaming regulation at the federal level, and some of the things that are being discussed are things that we've talked about here that have already come up at various state levels, such as limiting college player props, limiting negative outcome bets, and discussion of player limits. This is a lame duck session of the Senate, so this is a lot for show. I'm not sure how much of this is going to carry into the new year. I think this is a way for a lot of the federal elected officials to say, hey, we've discussed this. But, I think there's more likelihood of some sort of federal regulation than less likelihood. Of course, it wouldn't happen for, probably a while. But it's something to look out for. And I just personally believe a lot of these issues are things that the operators themselves could correct, and they should think about it before they're going to be forced to, like we saw in Massachusetts with player limits. And now that the feds have talked about it, I would say the odds of player limit regulations being implemented in Massachusetts are almost 100%.
Wow.
Because if the federal government's talked about it, they're going to be puffing their chests saying, hey, we were first on this. So I think you're going to definitely see regulations in Massachusetts about how players are limited on both ends and at least force the books to disclose what they're doing and why.
Wow, that is extremely interesting. And like you said, lame duck Senate session. They got 3 days left and they're done for the holidays. So you're right, they're going to talk about it. But I like the idea that you're mentioning. But man, so if they do lower the limits, you think people are going to try to make multiple accounts, try to work around it that way when they're betting?
Well, it's like everything else. I always say every time a rule is passed in the regulated space, an illegal sportsbook gets its wings. It's much like at the end of It's a Wonderful Life when, my favorite is when they go back to Pottersville and he's like, oh, I'm making angels, and he's bringing up the cash register. I'm giving out wings. Every time you regulate a sports book, an illegal book gets its wings. So yeah, there's always going to be a counter to every single rule and every single regulation.
Imagine
and
that.
Well, I think the disclosure part about player limits is important. I think the biggest issue that regulators and legislators are missing right now is the strength and vitality of the illegal betting space and this upcoming or sort of new issue about sweepstakes betting. So what you have legislators and regulators who spend a lot of time dealing with what they're charged to deal with, which is regulating legal sports books, but there's no one really keeping an eye on illegal operators. I'm surprised at how many states have sent cease and desist orders to Bovada, and Bovada's cooperated with all of them, which tells me that they might be considering, entering in the legal space in this country, especially if Texas were to fall eventually. So, it's just something for people who bet to think about, that some of these frustrations they have are being addressed.
Excellent commentary there, Bill. Adam Thompson, closing thoughts.
I was looking at futures, and I feel like, team expectations are based on how well a general manager is doing. And overachieving and underachieving is based more on the coach against the spread. So you can see if a coach has overachieved and underachieved. And so far this year, coach of the year is, anybody guess? Anybody know? Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, 11-3 against the spread this year, 78.6%. Kudos to what he's done with Bo Nix. Pittsburgh Steelers, who are actually projected, they were plus 700 just to win the AFC North. By far the worst odds of any team. They're 10-4 against the spread, 71%. So those two coaches, kudos to them. On the flip side, Tennessee Titans, 2-12 against the spread, 14%. So coal in the stocking of Brian Callahan.
Wow. Nick Whalen, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm looking up the coach of the year odds. There is some strong correlation there. I will inform you that Brian Callahan is plus 100,000 right now to win coach of the year. So that would line up with what Adam said. But you look at the top candidates right now at the DK Sportsbook. Kevin O'Connell, he's the odds-on favorite at plus 110. Minnesota's 9-4-1 against the spread. Dan Campbell is plus 250. Detroit's 9-5 against the spread. Sean Payton is plus 350. Like Adam mentioned, he's been the best ATS coach in the NFL. You got Mike Tomlin in the mix. The Steelers 10-4 ATS. So I think that is a strong correlation to look at if you're playing that market in the future. Great notes by Adam and Bill. I'm just going to use my time here, guys, to give out a bonus pick, one that I wanted to put on my card, but in the time that we've been recording this show, we have confirmation that the Cleveland Browns are making another quarterback change. They're going to Dorian Thompson-Robinson in week 16, which that pushes me toward the under here, guys. There's still a 48.5 out there at FanDuel, and I do not trust the Cleveland Browns to hold up their end of the bargain. I think it's easy to talk yourself into this team, whipping the ball around 45 times with Jameis Winston, putting up points. We've seen it a couple times this season. We've also seen that offense fall flat now in back-to-back weeks. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson, guys, started 3 games last season. It wasn't pretty. It was not pretty. In those starts, the Cleveland Browns scored 12 points, 13 points, and 3 points. So I know Cincinnati, always dangerous taking an under with that team. They could go over by themselves, but if you could still find a 48.5 out there, I would lean under with the Browns going to Cincinnati this week.
Wow. And I tell you what, maybe the under on Jerry Jeudy's yardage props may not be a bad idea this week because it's no longer Jameis Winston feeding him 13 high-quality targets because Jerry Jeudy was eating. Well, last thing I want to say is the Ravens and the Steelers are playing this week, and the Ravens are 6-point favorites. Normally, this series is always 2.5 to 3.5. That's usually it. Now, we'll see what happens when this game goes out. George Pickens' injury, he missed last week, so that could be critical, but that is a big number. But the interesting thing is the Steelers have a 1-game lead. And if the Ravens win, it's tied. But the Steelers have a better conference record. But to close the season, Pittsburgh will get Kansas City. We'll see if Mahomes is back from the high ankle. And they get Cincinnati, whereas Baltimore gets Houston and Cleveland. So this game is massive. It always is. But if Baltimore, they could have a legitimate path to actually winning this division with 5 losses right now. And for them, because if they go in as a wild card, they are probably not getting through the playoffs. But if they can somehow win the division, it does make their path a bit easier. All right, everybody, this has been the Bookies Plus weekly gambling show. Be sure to bookmark bookies.com/picks so you can check out our free picks, not just NFL, but all sports. Remember, we're off for the holiday next week, but we'll catch you Thursday, January 2nd with Week 18 picks. Good luck to all and be profitable.